You're listening to the Deidre Regal Hope and Healing Radio Show, where your voice matters. We're glad you're here and believe you will be too. And now, Deidre Regal with today's guest.
Welcome to part 2 of Love in the Face of Hate, How to Navigate. And today I have the distinct pleasure of having as my guest a lovely young woman named Elizabeth Baden Knowles. Liz, welcome to the Deidre Regal Hope and Healing Radio Show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Likewise. Let me tell our listeners a little bit about how you and I met, and then I'd like to tell them a little bit about you as well. So Liz and I met more than 10 years ago in Sarasota, Florida, in the theater, and Liz studied with me for, quite a number of years, voice, piano, ballet, et cetera, And she was one of those people, like so many that we meet, that we just connect with on the spiritual and the soul level. And we've remained friends. She's now living in Los Angeles. And so, Liz, with your permission, I'm going to just give a quick rundown to the audience about who you are. She was born in Bradenton, Florida. She is an actress, writer, and musician. She's been a lifelong performer, a lover of music, and is an Indigo Child with a deeply spiritual connection to the world. When Liz was 18, she moved away from home and immersed herself in the diverse and political atmosphere of Washington, D.C. as a student at the George Washington University. And, of course, we all are very aware of our political feelings about what's going on in our world today. So it's lovely that Liz had that time in Washington to feel that energy. After George Washington University, she went on to study acting with renowned instructors, including at institutions like the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. Liz, I remember when you came to me and said, gee, could you write a recommendation? And I was so happy to do that for you because that was a wonderful time for you in London. And in 2017, Liz graduated from the University of Central Florida with a bachelor's degree in creative writing and theater, concentrating in poetry, screenwriting, and acting. And as I said earlier, Liz is now living in West Hollywood, where she is building a career in film acting, and she's pursuing a life of joy and presence. So, Liz.
Yes.
Let's
That's
get
me.
into that's you, and boy, am I glad it's you. I really am. Let's get into our discussion today that I've specifically asked you to be a part of. Because of your background and the generation that you are in life and where you are in life at this point. So you're a young actor living and working in Los Angeles. And as you observe these chaotic and upsetting events, for instance, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, the Thousand Oaks incident, the Parkland shooting, and we have now a major news media outlet saying that violence and mass shootings are becoming the norm in our country. What is your take? What is your take on the current state of affairs?
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm disturbed, but I have a very interesting perspective because of my life experience. So I was born and raised in Florida in a hunting family. So I grew up around guns. I personally own guns. I've gone hunting. But it was the type of hunting where it was like providing for the family living off the land. We had land. We hunted. It was hunting. The sporty part of it, I think, was more shooting sporting clays. We didn't really think of it as anything violent. It was more like providing for the family and having the skill for survival. So that's kind of my background with guns. So I've got that piece. Then I've got the piece where down the line, my family started hosting gun trainings at our property in Mayaca. And there was a lot of opposition within the family about that. And anyway, so I have a very intensely intimate relationship with guns. And so seeing guns used, had been raised around them, and it was like a normal. I wasn't scared of guns. They didn't scare me. I didn't think people who owned them were scary. I didn't think about this. I mean, Columbine happened in the 90s, and I was a kid, so I didn't really that didn't even occur to me as school shootings. That didn't occur to me as something that would ever happen. We were more worried about, well, I went to private school until high school. So at private school, we really didn't worry about it. And I looked up the statistics on it, and the margin, you're way more likely to be involved in a school shooting at a public school. I felt very protected most of my life. And so now, looking at the world and seeing how violent it's gotten and how sick, it's really upsetting to me, because it's making this thing that was such a good thing growing up for me. It was providing for the family. It was sports, with shooting the sporting clays, the clay pigeons in the air. You know, it was fun. It was helpful. It was good. And now it's so scary, disturbing, and violent. So it's made me rethink my whole life in so many ways. And what's really scary is that my uncle, who was hosting these shooting events at our property, one of those people trained on our property could go out and shoot somebody. And thank God that's not, thank God, because my mom put a stop to all these shooting events at the property a couple of years ago, before the shootings got really, really densely, they're occurring all the time now. I looked up this amazing graph the Washington Post posted, and you can visually see from 1966, I think it was, until 2018, the incidents. And then they're shown in different sizes, and you can see how they're getting so much more frequent, so much larger in quantity of the people being shot in these mass shootings.
Yes.
It's just so disturbing. And more than being an actor, like as an actor, as a human, it's affecting me. As an actor, I don't think about it in those terms, other than, wow, I hope that these films aren't giving these mentally ill people more ammo, pun intended there. It's so scary to think about influencing people. And I think that it's really affected me as an artist, in that I'm so careful about what kind of content I want to put out there, because I do definitely think that in our generation, the social media and the internet and all of that, it's just this endless vacuum of information, this like void that you can just go get lost in. And I think people who have a predisposition for mental illness, it's very dangerous.
That's an interesting take on things, Liz. That's very interesting. We could make an argument about gun ownership, and I'm sure people listening to this interview will fall on both sides of that, to whatever their personal opinions are.
Right.
You're speaking about mental illness and about the arts, and how being careful with your content. So, and this is why I was so specific to ask you to be on the show, because this show is geared for hope and healing. How do we maintain our hope, and how do we heal what needs to be healed? So you're really speaking about this affecting you on the personal level as well as an actor. So, so how do you plan for your future and make daily decisions? And are you worried? I mean, how are you dealing with it?
It has honestly, ever since I would say Sandy Hook, my whole perception of being a parent has changed. I'm not a parent yet, but I've been in a relationship for 6 years now. We're in our 7th year. We're working towards our future together. And Todd and I, and so it really, really affects us. It really, truly does. So we go to a lot of concerts. We're big music lovers. I'm a musician. We love music. We go to festivals and concerts, and we have to be on alert at all times.
Yes.
I have not yet been to anything where, knock on wood, I've felt like we were in danger in that way, in a bombing or a shooting type of way. But it's very scary being in a crowd of people and thinking, okay, where are the exits? So, for instance, last night I went to a concert with Todd. We went to see one of his favorite bands from Florida. They're a band called Under Oath. And I immediately was looking, where are the exits? I have to immediately find the exits, and then we get together and we come up with a plan. And so the time before that, we were at a concert, and it was more of like a old theater type of venue. So there was a stage. The one yesterday was kind of like an auditorium. This was more like a theater. And so Todd and I were looking for the exits, and we said, okay, so if somebody comes in, they're probably going to come in that way. They're going to shoot the security guards. They're going to come into the crowd. We actually seriously do this, Deidre. It's really scary. But Todd always says to me, he says, we're not going to stop going because we're not going to live in fear. We're just going to live smart. Got it. So that's how we kind of, you can't let these people control us, and that's what they want. They want us to be scared. Maybe they don't even know that's what they want because they're so mentally ill. And I want to go back to the mental illness thing real quick, just because I come from a very spiritual mindset. So I believe that everyone is somewhat on a scale of mental illness because we have our mind, and unless you're completely enlightened, your mind is talking to you, and you have thoughts that aren't necessarily true. So I consider that on the scale of mental illness. I read The Power of Now many years ago, and that kind of totally changed my perception of how I viewed my thoughts. So some people might not agree with that, and they have this really like black and white idea of what mental illness is. But I see myself as having struggled with mental illness. I see myself as struggling with mental illness every day, in that, you know, you'll have a thought, and then the thought may ruminate, and then all of a sudden you're in a bad mood, or you're depressed about something that happened 10 years ago. That is not really what's happening right now in the present moment. So I just wanted to say that. Correct. You get what I'm saying? So like that's
I do.
How I view it.
Yeah. Well, this was my. I'm sorry. Please continue, Liz.
No. Well, that was just kind of. I wanted to clarify how I see mental illness there.
Well,
I'm going to refer to it a lot.
Well, my personal feeling is that if you live on the third rock from the sun in the solar system, you've been at some point traumatized. All 7.5 billion of us, or whatever the number happens to be now. This is just what this planet is. There is trauma, and as much joy, happiness, and jubilation as there is all of that, there is also there's trauma. It just is. So all of us are dealing with something in some way, and you're very correct, I believe, about, our minds have been trained in the way that they've been trained, and all we have to do is even look in this country, much less others, and see that we are all dealing, all of us, with some form of control or some form of education that said you must be a this, you must be a that, whether your soul agrees or not, and we've been programmed. I think a lot of us are waking up to the fact that we have been programmed in whatever ways we've been programmed. So my next question was going to be to you, and you've really answered it pretty darn well. If we look at our society from a spiritually enlightened vantage point, do you see a larger picture? And if you do, what is that picture in your eyes, Liz?
Oh, wow. Excuse me. Wow. So this is how I see it. We are one. Currently we live in duality, but in the maybe some would say truer realm, there is singularity and everything is one. And in that oneness is pure love and light, and that resides within each of us. But like you were saying, from our life experience, from the horrors of the world, we have become disconnected from our truth, which is this pure, loving, high on life oneness. fearless world. And I think that all of this violence is fear. It's fear manifesting itself.
Interesting.
And currently we have a very fear-based administration in the White House. Fear is all around us. And it's harder than ever, I think, to be just carefree, loving, and not fearful. The big picture is tapping into that love and healing ourselves. That's the goal. The goal is to love. That's why we're here. We're here to love and to forgive and to learn about love in ways that we wouldn't get to in the pure, perfect, loving world. So I don't think it's that we're searching for perfection, but we are searching for healing. And the people who are committing these acts are clearly hurting. Hurt people, hurt people. And I think the big picture is we need to have reform on mental health in the world, not just this country. I mean, this country has a major problem compared to, from my research, I researched a lot about mental illness, the rates of mass murders in other countries, gun violence in other countries versus America, and it looks like, wow, America is just the poster child for gun violence. And there's got to also be some kind of gun reform. I don't know what that means, but there has to be a better way to protect our children. I mean, that's the really scary part, is children can't be safe at schools. And
True. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very sad. I think that there's reforms to be made, and there's forgiveness to be given. And I also think it's an education problem in the public school system. I'm sure that private schools have very similar problems to the public schools, but I had an interesting experience of having gotten to go to private school for a long time and then go to public school and see, and it also depends on the grade your school is and where you're going to school. So not all public schools are created equal, but we need to be taught skills for life in school. We need to be taught about mindfulness and breathing and how to deal with our emotions and forgiveness and love, like the really important things in life that when you're not thinking about careers and money, these are the things that are the bedrock of the world that we're not being taught. And a lot of parents weren't taught by their parents, so they're not going to teach the kids. So it's up to the schools oftentimes to parent kids, because everybody needs to be taught about love. And I don't know, I don't know how we can get that to happen, because it'll take a long time to get those reforms in place, but I guess it starts at grassroots level. Like, we just have to love each other and be kind to our neighbor, and when it seems like somebody is having a hard time, alert the police, alert somebody.
You're saying so many valuable things, and this is one of those interviews that I would encourage our listeners to go back and listen to again, because you've spoken, Liz, so eloquently to many layers of our society. And of course, you've spoken about education and, what do we really learn in school? And it brings to mind, years ago, I musical directed a wonderful play called Everything I've Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And I think I've gotten all the words correct. And it was this charming but very truthful musical that says really what we've learned in kindergarten about sharing, caring, et cetera, was probably really all we ever needed to learn in life. But we get into the education system and what we have, whether it's public or private, we have teachers who feel it incumbent upon them to guide us into training for careers or jobs and whatever, so we can fulfill the programming that, you get out of college, you get a job, you work for X number of years, and you retire, you get sick, and you die. And we've had this format in place for a long time. And my take on it is that if our systems, meaning our government, our financial, our medical, our education, etc., were entirely perfect, which we know they're not. If all these systems were perfect, our jails would be empty, the mental hospitals would be empty, everybody would still be married to their original spouse, our children would be perfect, etc., etc. And that's not the world we live in. And you spoke about duality, and I'd like to bring it back to that, to the fear versus love. And I find myself, as I go through my own journey in life, wondering if indeed the truth is that when I am feeling wounded and I'm in need of healing, that the answer is actually lying there in the wound. And for me to go have the courage to look at the wound and do the necessary healing is where I find what I'm looking for. In other words, I find it within myself. I'm not looking outside of myself any longer for that which I believe I need. I'm handling my own internal work with myself and loving myself at the fullest extent possible, and then letting life mirror back to me the love. Therefore, I think the fear can serve a valuable process, or a valuable fear can be a valuable servant to us, in that it is a contrast to love. And maybe we need, as humans, to experience both the dark and the light so we can appreciate both. I don't know. It would seem to me that was what duality would be. I can speak only for myself and say that when I do encounter duality, in other words, I would encounter fear, it causes me to say the fear has a value. It's trying to tell me something. It's trying to show me something.
Right.
Be careful this. Be careful that. Look back at the wound. You know, your okay. Something from your past is popping up. It's asking for healing, and do you have the courage to look at that and turn that fear into love? And I think each one of us on the planet has that power within us. So, so you know, this brings me now to ask. You mentioned our. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Just off of what you were saying. I think that you're so right. Everyone has the ability within them to do it, but we are so malnourished in so many senses of the word. We're spiritually malnourished. We're literally malnourished. That the truth in those wounds is just buried so deep underneath all of these other issues and lack that I think it's really challenging for these people, especially the ones that are committing these types of crimes, to get to that place, because the voices are so much louder than that little voice within the fear, you know?
Yes, and you often hear a perpetrator say, you know, so-and-so told me to, or whatever their take on that is. And so you're right, the voices of fear seem to be so much larger and louder than the voice of love and internal, that inside job happiness. So a moment ago you mentioned the current administration of our country, and I'm sure other people listening in other countries can say, well, gee, you know, I'm looking at my politicians and all this corruption is emerging, and how do I trust the government to do anything or make any changes? And that brings up a theory that, you know, can our governments, can our politicians be the people who affect the change, or, and this is a question I think is wonderful to pose, do we artists, and I speak as a singer, composer, etc., do we artists have many wonderful tools in our hand? And if we do, what can we artists bring to the table for all of humanity, including our next door neighbor and ourselves, in the way of hope, healing, and leadership? What's your opinion on that, Liz?
Oh, I mean, think about music. I think that music and film are two of the most influential modes of healing and education for people. But watching a documentary, when you see those images of what's really happening, or when you see a film based on a story, or, you know, Hotel Rwanda, these types of films that sting those images into your mind, it has such a more lasting effect than seeing this person up on a stand, you know, telling us how these policies are going to change our lives. That's why I said a little earlier, I think it's a grassroots level thing to start. We have to start at the grassroots level. And as artists, we have more tools to impact people with. Our whole purpose as artists is to make people feel things. And and that comes back to the spiritual thing. You know, I believe that we are a part of the great creation of all that is. So we are creation, and we are creating creation. We are creators. And we can create really whatever we want. And I think it is a big responsibility for artists to choose to create art that will impact people in a positive way. And my mom has really banged that into me because she's very.
Thank you, Virginia.
Yes, thank you, Mom. She's very careful about what she writes or what she says, and she's always influenced me in that. You know, when I've wanted to make some really ridiculous comedy something in raunchy or whatever random actor moment I've had, she's always like, now is that really the best use of your tools? It's almost like being a wizard with this magic that you can cast a spell out into the world, and you have to decide if you're casting a good spell or a bad spell, or you know, will it affect people in a loving way, in a healing way?
Yeah, it's brilliant. That's utterly brilliant. And knowing, as I said, knowing your mother as I do, and a big shout out to Virginia for raising such a wonderful daughter. Virginia, you're right, and Liz, you're right. You know, when we really are masters of ourselves, command of ourselves, and making those conscious, awake, and aware choices minute to minute, will this be helpful? Will this be beneficial? Is this in the highest good, or is it not? And I think I come back strongly to the comment I made that we all have the power of choice in any given moment. So, and we've kind of already answered my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What advice would you give to your generation and to your parents' generation in dealing with putting out love in the face of hate?
I think we have to, so for my parents' generation, I think it has a lot to do with hearing people, listening. I think that us younger people, we've had the internet at our fingers pretty much our entire lives. So we've heard all kinds of opinions virtually. You know, we've read all kinds of things. We're very open to new ideas and new technology, and we're like, we just eat it up. Conspiracy theories, whatever, we'll read it, we'll go out, throw that one out, you know. We'll
yes,
we do it. I mean, most of us do. But for our parents' generation, I think that I've noticed personally people having a really hard time just listening other people's opinions and validating them, and then finding a way to love even though you disagree. So
that is big. Yes, go on.
So I think that there's a big forgiveness problem in older generations, and at least from what I have experienced in my life, I've noticed a lot of being quick to jump to conclusions. I just think that it's about sitting down with each other and finding the acceptance and the love within the disagreements or the hateful moments, and recognizing I am feeling hateful right now, or I'm feeling angry, recognizing what they're feeling, but still being able to find the love within that moment and the forgiveness within that moment. And then for my generation, I really think people need to put their frickin' phones down. I'm terrible about it. I am on there all the time. I'll think of something, then I'll be researching it and I'll be reading about it. So I use my internet for mostly just researching random things and understanding new ideas, and I'm always on there communicating with people. And I think that we need to sit down, set the technology away, and get in the present moment, because the love is only in the present moment. And I think that it's so much easier to be disconnected and have that sort of, when you're disconnected and you just don't feel anything. You can't feel love if you're not feeling anything. And if you're existing in virtual land.
Yeah, it's hard to fall in love with your cell phone.
Right.
For real. I mean, you're right. We're living very disconnected lives, even though we feel that we are connected. And I remember years ago you spoke to me about the importance of human touch. We need to be in contact with one another, and it's the only way we ever, I think, come to terms with who we are and who the other person is, and understand that other person is merely an aspect of ourselves, because we are all one. And this changes a lot, Liz. I think you've given great advice to your parents' generation and to your generation, and I really think you're talking about finding common ground and being aware of who we are in ourselves, and being able to be in a receiving and accepting space with another. It doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries. It simply means that we're open to receiving and accepting that person exactly as they are. And this is huge. This is huge.
Just quickly, I wanted to add, this is something that I've learned through Tantra, through acting, through my own spiritual experiences, but eye gazing is a really big part of it, and that I think is kind of like the expert level, because I think a lot of people who are just dealing with trying even to get to the love spot, like getting into the eye gazing is like woo-woo, but I think gazing into someone's eyes and looking into that black pupil and recognizing that is the person that is mirroring you, that is the person that is connected to you. They're human like you. They feel like you. They hurt. They love. They cry. They laugh. That person is a human. They have eyes. They're gazing at you. That is one of the most powerful experiences, even with a stranger, because I've done it with like strangers in acting classes and Tantra classes. When you gaze into someone's eyes and you see their humanity and the oneness, and you feel the connection. I think that even people who have the hardest relationships could find the love in that moment. So
it's a very, very, very beautiful point, Liz. And speaking of acting class, and as I say, I know we're coming to the end of our time together, although we could talk for hours about this. You made some very excellent points today. I want to tell our listeners that Liz is a wonderful actor, and I know that from firsthand experience. And so if you're looking for an actor and you've gotten to know this woman who, listening to this interview, who will really dig into her role and do her research and show up and be in the moment and be cognizant, this is a gal that's definitely worth hiring. There it is. Give a little shout out to you, Liz. And so
thank you so much.
You're so welcome. If you do want to reach Liz, she can be reached at her gmail.com address, and that is Baden, and that is spelled Baden, Knowles, and that is spelled KNOWLES at gmail.com. So I'll say that again. Her email address is Baden, KNOWLES at gmail.com. Now, if you want to go check out her website, it is lizbadenknowles.com. I'm going to spell that, LizBadenknowles.com. So check her out. She's a wonderful actor, and website is just lizbadenknowles.com.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. It's all good. Did your hair get suddenly blonde, Liz? I can say that because I'm blonde. We can have a little laugh there.
It's been a little bit blonder, to be honest.
Oh,
a little bit blonder.
That would make sense living in California. And again, a beautiful young woman in so many ways. So, Liz, I really want to express my gratitude to you for taking time out of your schedule today to share your thoughts and all the preparation that you put into the questions that I sent to you that I knew I wanted to ask. And thank you for contributing to what I hope is really good quality energy in this 5-part series that can give people hope and answers. Thank you, Liz.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And blessings to everybody who's listened to this. And see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
The views and opinions expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the show and host. This podcast and its content are not intended to diagnose or treat any medical or mental condition or substitute for proper professional care in this regard. You've been listening to the Deidre Regal Hope and Healing Radio Show, where your voice matters. We hope you have enjoyed this podcast and found inspiration for your own life. If you would like to be a guest on this show, please contact us at drhoperadio@gmail.com. That's drhoperadio@gmail.com. I'm Oliver Dill on behalf of all of us here at the Deidre Regal Hope and Healing Radio Show, wishing you a day full of joy and goodness.